What if the mask of the narcissist could no longer deceive? What if the empath, the one they believed weak, suddenly spoke their secret language, exposing the hidden theater of control? In that moment, the hunter becomes the hunted, and the mirror begins to reveal truths the narcissist cannot bear to see. Tonight, we descend into the unconscious, guided by Jungian psychology, to explore a confrontation as old as myth itself. The manipulator and the mirror, the predator and the dreamer, the narcissist and the empath. This is not merely a story of relationships, but of archetypes, forces moving through the human soul. When the empath awakens and learns the hidden grammar of the narcissist's world, the entire psychic balance shifts. What was once domination becomes revelation, and what was once shadowed begins to reveal its true face. There is a dance that has been played out in the unconscious of humanity for centuries, a dance between two archetypal forces, the narcissist and the empath. They meet not by chance, but as if summoned by some unseen magnet in the psyche, each carrying within them patterns that are older than their personal story. Jung would tell us that what we encounter in such relationships is never just personal. It is archetypal, a reenactment of forces that rise from the collective unconscious itself. The narcissist does not enter the stage of the psyche as merely an individual with inflated pride or excessive vanity. They arrive as the mask bearer, the trickster who thrives on illusion. Theirs is a role soaked in myth and shadow, a figure who can mesmerize with charm while concealing an abyss within. Yet this mask does not find meaning in isolation. The narcissist requires an audience. Their theater demands a witness, a stage on which their fragile grandiosity can be reflected back to them. And so, the empath is drawn into the drama, like the moon pulled into orbit by a gravitational force it cannot see. The empath, however, is not a passive character. To be sensitive, to be open, to absorb the emotions of others. This is not weakness, though the narcissist may see it as such. This is the gift of depth, the ability to perceive beneath the surface. Empathy is the capacity to feel into the hidden spaces of the other, to sense the unspoken currents. And when the empath meets the narcissist, they feel the pull of that hidden abyss, often mistaking it for a call to heal, to save, to pour themselves into the cracks of another's fractured soul. Here lies the beginning of the archetypal dance: one who thrives by concealing emptiness, and one who seeks meaning by filling emptiness. The narcissist's mask of strength finds the empath's heart of compassion, and together they enact a ritual older than memory. This is not yet a conscious relationship, it is a dream enacted in waking life. Jung would remind us that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. And so, the empath calls this fate, believing they have found a soul to heal, while the narcissist calls it conquest, believing they have found a vessel to drain. But look more closely. This is not simply a story of victim and predator. It is the meeting of opposites. The narcissist embodies the shadow of inflation, the terror of emptiness, the desperate grasp for control. The empath embodies the shadow of overgiving, the fear of abandonment, the yearning to merge with another. Both are incomplete, both trapped in archetypal roles that bind them. And like all archetypal patterns, the dance continues until one of them awakens. To understand the archetypal nature of this union, imagine the narcissist as the actor, forever adjusting their costume, rehearsing lines, needing the applause of others to feel alive. They are the trickster of myth, the shapeshifter who seduces by appearing to be what the other longs for. And opposite them stands the empath, not an actor but a mirror, reflecting back the emotions, the wounds, and even the hidden despair of the one before them. The narcissist feeds upon this mirror, taking its reflection as proof of their own grand illusion. The empath, meanwhile, confuses reflection with responsibility, believing that to see the wound is to be tasked with healing it. The archetypal dance deepens. The narcissist tests, manipulates, withdraws affection only to bestow it again, creating cycles of craving and despair. The empath absorbs, adjusts, forgives, bends until their own sense of self dissolves into the demands of the other. But beneath this surface exchange, something more profound is at work. The unconscious psyche is attempting to bring both figures into confrontation with their shadows. The narcissist must one day face the emptiness they conceal. The empath must one day confront the compulsion to rescue. Each holds up a mirror to the other, though neither yet realizes it. Jung's language of archetypes helps us see why this pattern is so compelling. These roles are not chosen. They are lived as if compelled by forces larger than the individual. The narcissist, though appearing powerful, is enslaved to their mask. Without it, they fear disintegration. The empath, though appearing selfless, is enslaved to their longing for union. Without it, they fear isolation. Together they orbit one another like two planets bound in a gravitational field. But the field itself is unconscious, and until consciousness breaks through, the orbit repeats endlessly. The archetypal dance is both beautiful and destructive. Beautiful because it reveals the depth of human longing, the desire to be seen, to be held, to be recognized. Destructive because when enacted unconsciously, it drains the life force of both. The narcissist remains trapped in illusion, never daring to meet their own emptiness. The empath remains trapped in sacrifice, never daring to claim their own wholeness. And so, the stage is set, and the dance continues, until the moment arrives when one of them awakens to the deeper pattern. It is often the empath who awakens first, for their sensitivity becomes a doorway into awareness. They begin to notice the script, the repetitions, the circular patterns of manipulation. They begin to feel the dissonance between words and reality, between mask and truth. This moment of recognition is the breaking of the spell. The empath begins to see not only the narcissist's performance, but also their own role in sustaining it. It is here that the archetypal dance trembles, for one partner has stepped out of the unconscious choreography and is beginning to move with awareness. Yet before this awakening can fully unfold, the empath must walk through their own shadow. They must see that their gift of empathy has become entangled with a wound that seeks meaning through saving others. They must confront the fear that if they stop giving, they will no longer be worthy of love. This confrontation is painful, for it asks the empath to withdraw the projection of savior and to stand alone, not as a mirror, but as a self. The dance of narcissist and empath is not simply the story of toxic relationships. It is a symbolic enactment of the psyche's attempt to bring unconscious wounds into the light of awareness. The narcissist's mask demands that the empath confront illusion. The empath's mirror demands that the narcissist confront truth. Both are given the chance to awaken, though rarely do both accept it. In this archetypal dance, we are reminded that what feels like fate is often the stage of the unconscious. It is not the individual alone who moves the steps, but the deeper forces of the collective psyche, summoning us to confront the masks we wear and the wounds we carry. The narcissist and the empath are not enemies by chance. They are archetypal partners in a drama designed to awaken the hidden layers of the soul. There comes a moment in the dance between narcissist and empath when the veil begins to thin. At first, the empath is caught in the labyrinth, responding instinctively to the shifts, the manipulations, the sudden withdrawals, and calculated gestures of affection. It feels like a dream where logic fails and emotion dictates every move. But slowly, through suffering and repetition, the empath begins to notice a pattern. What seemed chaotic begins to reveal an order. Though it is not the order of love, it is the order of manipulation. This is the moment when the empath begins to learn the hidden language of the narcissist. This language is not spoken with words alone. It is a grammar of silence, of facial expressions, of sudden shifts in tone. It is an entire lexicon built not on truth, but on the concealment of truth. The narcissist does not speak in transparency. They speak in omission, in suggestion, in the subtle shaping of reality, so that the other is left doubting themselves. Their language is one of power, crafted to distort, to destabilize, to pull another into orbit around their own fragile center. For the empath, this discovery is not immediate. At first, they feel confusion, questioning themselves. Am I imagining this? Why do I feel unseen, unheard, unacknowledged even as words of affection are spoken? Yet these very questions mark the beginning of awakening. The unconscious whispers before it shouts, and the empath's deep sensitivity begins to translate the gaps, the contradictions, the subtle betrayals. They begin to see that what is presented on the surface does not align with the undercurrent beneath. Carl Jung once observed that the psyche speaks in symbols. And here, too, the empath learns to read symbols rather than statements. A sudden withdrawal of warmth is not simply moodiness. It is a maneuver to instill fear of abandonment. A carefully timed compliment is not always affection. It is bait, designed to hook compliance. The narcissist communicates not with honesty, but with symbols of control. And once the empath sees these symbols for what they are, the spell begins to lose its hold. It is as though the empath is learning a foreign tongue, a secret dialect spoken in shadows. Where once they were overwhelmed, now they begin to decode. They hear not only what is said, but what is not said. They notice the way praise is given only when obedience follows, the way silence is used as punishment, the way anger is hidden beneath charm. The empath learns to listen beneath the surface, to perceive the unconscious script playing out beneath the spoken words. This shift is profound, for it marks the movement from being unconsciously acted upon to becoming consciously aware. Jung would call this the process of bringing unconscious material into consciousness. The empath, once passive in the drama, begins to awaken as an active participant. They begin to realize that they are not simply trapped in fate, but in a symbolic language that can be read, understood, and ultimately transcended. But the empath's awakening is not only about decoding the narcissist. It is also about hearing their own unconscious voice. For why was the empath drawn to this dance at all? Why did they respond to manipulation with giving, to devaluation with deeper sacrifice? The language of the unconscious is twofold. It reveals the patterns of the other, but it also reveals the wounds within oneself. The empath realizes that their sensitivity, though a gift, has been shaped by an inner script, perhaps one written long ago in childhood, where love was conditional, where approval had to be earned, where silence or anger from a caregiver was enough to bend their heart into submission. Now, standing in the presence of the narcissist, the empath hears the echo of that original wound. To learn the narcissist's language is also to learn their own. The manipulation that once felt like truth is now recognized as repetition. The empath is not simply living in the present, they are reliving the past. And in this recognition, the unconscious reveals its purpose to bring into awareness what was once hidden, so that the cycle may be broken. The narcissist senses this shift, though often not consciously. They feel the empath's eyes no longer dazzled by illusion, no longer entirely responsive to the cues of manipulation. They feel the mirror turning, reflecting back not only the performance, but the emptiness beneath it. The narcissist, accustomed to invisibility of their shadow, now begins to glimpse it in the empath's awakened gaze. This is unsettling, for it destabilizes the entire script. Their language, once secret, is being translated, and in translation its power diminishes. The empath, however, must tread carefully here. To know the language of the narcissist is to risk being pulled deeper into the labyrinth. Knowledge without integration can become another trap, another cycle of obsession. But if the empath allows this knowledge to guide them inward, to examine their own shadow, then the learning becomes alchemy. They discover that empathy is not simply absorption of another's pain, the capacity to perceive without losing oneself. They discover that sensitivity, when anchored in self-awareness, becomes clarity rather than confusion. The unconscious has a peculiar way of teaching. It does not reveal its secrets gently. It presents them through suffering, through repetition, through cycles that feel unbearable until the lesson emerges. For the empath, the lesson hidden in the narcissist's language is not merely about protecting themselves from manipulation. It is about realizing that they, too, have been speaking unconsciously, seeking love through sacrifice, seeking safety through compliance. The narcissist's manipulations bring this hidden script into the light. In Jungian terms, this is the confrontation with the shadow. The narcissist embodies one form of shadow, the inflation of ego, the denial of vulnerability, the exploitation of others. But the empath embodies another form, the shadow of self, neglect, the denial of boundaries, the compulsion to merge. Both shadows are revealed in the language of the unconscious, and both call for integration. As the empath learns this language, they begin to reclaim their own. They realize they are not merely a mirror for another's wounds. They have a voice, a truth, an inner authority that does not need validation through another's gaze. This realization does not happen in a single moment, but through the gradual translation of every silent cue, every contradiction, every manipulation unveiled. Each time they see clearly, the spell weakens. Each time they name what is happening, the unconscious grows lighter. The language of the unconscious, once mysterious, becomes a guide. It reveals to the empath that their entanglement with the narcissist is not punishment, but initiation, a call to awareness. To learn this language is to awaken, not only to the hidden motives of another, but to the deeper truths of the self. There is a tremor that runs through the carefully built world of the narcissist when they sense that the empath is no longer blind. For so long, the narcissist has lived in mastery of the stage, orchestrating every gesture, every silence, every word with calculated intent. They are the director of the play, the one who controls the script. But suddenly, something shifts. The empath, once pliable, once responding predictably to every cue, now sees through the act. The secret language is no longer secret, and in this moment, the narcissist feels disoriented, as though the ground beneath them has betrayed its solidity. The narcissist thrives in environments where they can project their shadow outward, never having to face it directly. They weave illusions to keep others entangled, ensuring that their fragility remains hidden beneath the mask of grandiosity. But the empath, by awakening, becomes something dangerous, a mirror that does not reflect back the desired image, but reveals the cracks beneath the surface. This is not the mirror that flatters, it is the mirror that exposes. And when the narcissist sees themselves reflected in this way, even if only unconsciously, it destabilizes their entire psychic foundation. Disorientation for the narcissist is not merely discomfort, it is existential terror. Their identity is a construct built upon fragile scaffolding of admiration, control, and denial of inner emptiness. When the empath refuses to play their part, when they no longer feed the illusion, the scaffolding begins to shake. Suddenly, the narcissist's words do not land as intended. Their gestures fail to provoke the same reactions. Their silences no longer instill the same fear. The narcissist begins to realize, perhaps dimly at first, that their audience has awakened, and without an audience, the performance collapses. This collapse is not always dramatic on the surface. It may appear as subtle irritability, an escalation of control attempts, or a sudden withdrawal. But beneath these behaviors lies a deeper psychic unraveling. The narcissist is confronting something they have spent their entire lives avoiding, the possibility of being seen not as they wish to appear, but as they truly are. Jung would call this the moment when the shadow breaks through the mask of the persona. The persona, the carefully crafted social face, can no longer hide the darker truths of the psyche. The empath's awakening acts as a catalyst for this rupture. By no longer responding predictably, they force the narcissist into confrontation with their own lack of substance. For the narcissist, this confrontation is unbearable. They experience it as betrayal, as defiance, as a threat to their very survival. Yet, what is truly threatened is not survival itself, but the illusion of control, the false self they have built as protection against the terror of their own emptiness. Disorientation often drives the narcissist into extremes. They may escalate their tactics, turning to rage, gaslighting, or desperate attempts to reassert dominance. They may swing between charm and cruelty, testing whether the empath can still be pulled back into the old orbit. This oscillation reveals their panic, for when their language fails, they scramble to rewrite the script. Yet the empath, having learned to read beneath the surface, now sees these swings for what they are, not expressions of power, but of fear. And it is fear that lies at the heart of the narcissist's disorientation. Fear of exposure, fear of rejection, fear of annihilation if the mask is ever fully stripped away. The narcissist has lived in avoidance of this fear, displacing it onto others, manipulating to keep it hidden. But when the empath reflects back the truth, when they see without being deceived, the narcissist can no longer entirely escape it. Even if they deny it consciously, the unconscious registers the blow. This is where the archetypal dimension becomes visible. The narcissist's disorientation is not only personal, it is symbolic. It is the encounter of the mask with the mirror, the persona with the shadow, illusion with truth. The empath becomes the agent of this confrontation, not through aggression, but through awareness. Awareness itself becomes the destabilizer, the silent force that disrupts the entire performance. For the narcissist, who depends upon unconscious complicity, consciousness in the other is intolerable. Yet the narcissist's disorientation also reveals the fragility of the role they play. They appear powerful, commanding, in control, yet their entire identity depends upon others remaining blind. Once the blindness is broken, their power begins to unravel. This is why the empath's awakening is so threatening. It strikes at the very root of the narcissist's constructed self. They are left disoriented because the reality they have relied upon, where others respond predictably to manipulation, has dissolved. The empath, in seeing clearly, withdraws the projection the narcissist once depended upon. The mirror no longer affirms the illusion. Instead, it reflects back emptiness, and emptiness is what the narcissist cannot bear. To face the void within themselves is to face the truth they have denied their entire lives. Thus, disorientation is not only about losing control of the other, but about being forced to glimpse their own shadow, even if only for an instant. In Jungian psychology, moments of disorientation are often gateways to transformation. But for the narcissist, transformation requires a willingness to confront the shadow consciously, a willingness that is often absent. Instead, they seek to restore the old order, to reassert the illusion. Yet the mark of disorientation lingers, a reminder that their mask is not invincible, that their theater is not unbreakable. And this reminder haunts them, even if they bury it beneath renewed efforts to control. For the empath, witnessing this disorientation is both liberating and unsettling. They see the cracks in the illusion. They sense the fragility beneath the performance, and they realize that the one who seemed so powerful is in truth deeply vulnerable, even terrified. This recognition shifts the dynamic entirely. The narcissist is no longer the untouchable figure of control, but a human being caught in their own unresolved shadow. The empath's clarity brings this truth to light, and in doing so, destabilizes the entire archetypal dance. In Jungian psychology, conflict is never meaningless. Every clash, every tension, every unbearable relationship that feels like a prison carries within it the seed of transformation. When the empath awakens to the manipulations of the narcissist, when the secret language has been decoded and the spell begins to fracture, what unfolds is not merely an escape from a toxic bond. It is something deeper, something archetypal. It is the beginning of individuation through conflict, the psyche's own alchemical process of forging wholeness from the fire of suffering. The empath, through their sensitivity, has been lured into the orbit of the narcissist. At first, this entanglement feels like destiny, a strange gravitational pull that cannot be resisted. But destiny, in Jung's terms, is often the mask of the unconscious. The empath was not simply drawn to another person. They were drawn to an inner pattern, a repetition of wounds, a reflection of what still slumbers within their own shadow. To suffer at the hands of the narcissist is to be confronted not only with the other's emptiness, but with the inner script that allowed such a bond to take root. Conflict, then, becomes the crucible. The empath begins to see the manipulation, the cycles of devaluation and reward, the disorienting nature of gaslighting. But they also begin to see themselves more clearly. They see their tendency to give until depleted, to merge until dissolved, to abandon their own needs in the hope of preserving connection. These realizations sting, for they strip away the illusion of innocence. The empath cannot remain a pure victim in this narrative, for the unconscious has drawn them here not to suffer endlessly, but to awaken. Individuation requires precisely this, the confrontation with shadow. The narcissist embodies one dimension of that shadow, but the empath carries the other. The narcissist flees from emptiness, inflating the ego to avoid fragility. The empath flees from loneliness, dissolving boundaries to avoid abandonment. Both, in their own way, are captured by fear. The conflict between them brings these fears into the open, dramatized in the theater of relationship, so that neither can be ignored. What once lay buried in the unconscious now rises into awareness, illuminated by the pain of entanglement. For the empath, the turning point comes when they realize that empathy itself must be purified. It is not enough to feel, to absorb, to endlessly give. To individuate is to recognize that empathy without boundaries is not compassion but self-erasure. This realization marks a profound shift. The empath begins to separate genuine care from unconscious compulsion. They learn that to feel deeply does not require them to lose themselves. They learn that to love another does not mean to abandon their own soul. In this way, the empath begins the journey toward wholeness, reclaiming the self from the shadow of over-giving. The narcissist, too, is offered a path through conflict, though few take it. Their disorientation in the face of an awakened empath forces them to glimpse the fragility they have long concealed. They are given, if only briefly, the chance to confront the emptiness within, to face the wound they have buried beneath grandiosity. In Jungian language, they are invited to meet their shadow directly. But this invitation requires humility, and humility is the one quality the narcissist resists most. Still, the opportunity remains, for conflict does not only expose, it also invites, whether accepted or denied. The possibility of transformation hovers like a ghost over the broken dance. Individuation through conflict is not a gentle process. It is violent in its intensity, stripping away illusions that once offered safety. The empath feels betrayed, disoriented, shattered by the realization that what they thought was love was often control. Yet this very shattering is the work of the psyche, dismantling what is false to make room for what is true. The narcissist's mask may crumble, but so too does the empath's illusion of saviorhood. Each must confront the roles they have played, not as punishments, but as revelations of the unconscious striving for balance. The alchemical imagery Jung so often invoked becomes fitting here. In alchemy, lead must be burned, dissolved, transformed through fire and water before gold can be revealed. The empath suffering at the hands of the narcissist is this burning process. It is the dissolution of naive empathy, the exposure of hidden wounds, the confrontation with the shadow. What emerges from this crucible, if endured with awareness, is not bitterness but strength, not hardness but clarity. The empath begins to embody what Jung called the self, the integrated totality that embraces both light and shadow, giving and receiving, compassion and boundary. Conflict is the teacher. Through conflict, the empath discovers that they were never powerless, only unconscious. Through conflict, they learn that their worth is not determined by how much they can absorb from another, but by the wholeness they carry within. Through conflict, they discover that true empathy includes the self as much as the other. This is the individuation process in motion, using the very relationship that once enslaved them as the vehicle for awakening. The narcissist, should they accept the confrontation, would undergo a parallel journey. They would learn that the mask is unsustainable, that control is a fragile illusion, that the emptiness within cannot be filled by domination. They would face the terror of their own vulnerability, the wound they have spent a lifetime denying. Such a confrontation, if embraced, could open the path to their own individuation, where the false self dissolves and the authentic self begins to emerge. Yet whether they take this path or retreat deeper into illusion is uncertain. For the empath, however, the transformation often begins here, in the ashes of conflict. They realize that what felt like destruction was, in truth, initiation. The narcissist was both wound and teacher, shadow and mirror, forcing them into confrontation with parts of themselves they had long ignored. The conflict was the vessel, and within that vessel, individuation was set into motion. And so we arrive at the threshold where the story of narcissist and empath is no longer just a tale of pain, but a map of the psyche itself. What began as a dance of illusion and entrapment has revealed itself as an initiation into consciousness. The empath learns to see, to read the hidden grammar of manipulation, to confront their own shadow of self-erasure. The narcissist, shaken by exposure, faces the terrifying reflection of their own emptiness. Together, they enact a drama that is not merely personal but archetypal, a mirror of the eternal struggle between mask and mirror, shadow and self, unconsciousness and awakening. Carl Jung once said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is what the empath does when they awaken to the language of the narcissist. They shine a light into the places where deception thrived, not only in the other, but in themselves. And this light is not comfortable. It burns, it blinds, it forces transformation, but it also reveals the possibility of wholeness, the chance to step beyond roles and into the deeper truth of the self. So the question lingers, how many of the masks in your life are you still mistaking for faces? And more dangerously, what masks within yourself are you still afraid to remove? For until those masks are seen, the archetypal dance continues, and you remain both dancer and dreamer in a play directed by the unconscious. The invitation is here, to see, to awaken, to step out of the dance not as victim, not as predator, but as one who has touched the shadow and emerged closer to the self. And perhaps, as you leave this story behind, you must ask yourself, what unconscious language is speaking through your own life right now? And are you finally ready to learn it?